Morning, everybody. I'm Celia Greaves from the UK Hydrogen and Fuel Cell Association. I'm here with several colleagues today to talk about what's going on in the UK and Scotland and who's available here to help you at Hyvolution. So I'll be starting with a short presentation on developments and activities across the UK. I'll then be handing over to my colleague Nigel Holmes from the Scottish Hydrogen and Fuel Cell Association, who'll be sharing some perspectives from there. And then we have our colleagues Aniko and Caroline from Scottish Development International and the Department for International Trade, just to talk a little bit about the services available to help companies make connections between Scotland and the UK. We are all on our group stand just over by the entrance, so happy to have many conversations after the presentation sessions. Okay, so if we make a start. Hopefully. We've got some IT issue, I think. Right. That's the long. I don't know where to. Okay. So, as I said, I'm from the UK Hydrogen and Fuel Cell Association. We're the leading trade group for hydrogen in the UK, 110 members, more joining by the week, and our members represent over 100,000 employees worldwide with combined revenues of 400 billion. And in terms of the sorts of areas that we work on, our main focus is on promoting the UK and particularly our members both at home and abroad, and making sure that we've got the right policies in place and frameworks so that we can grow our industry to meet its potential across net zero, energy resilience and clean growth. And in terms of international connections, we're members of Hydrogen Europe. We have extensive links across to other associations, both within Europe and beyond. And we also convene the Hydrogen Coordination Forum within the UK, which brings together a range of different groupings with interests in hydrogen and its applications. And in terms of the work that we do, we have a number of different working groups focused on a range of different areas, such as the different types of low-carbon hydrogen production, different application areas, hydrogen storage, and so on. So they are a mechanism through which our members can get involved in our policy thinking and help to develop our policies and our asks of government. We have a number of mechanisms to support our members. For example, we have an industry showcase available on our website, which has got details of member capabilities and projects, and this is searchable. So if you're looking for, say, electrolyser manufacturers or valve and fitting companies, you can use this guide to search for those sorts of capabilities. And just for those of you who are interested in learning more about what's going on in the UK, our annual conference will take place on the 24th of May at the prestigious QE2 Centre opposite Westminster. So you can find out more about that on our website. So I'm now going to talk a little bit about what's happening in the UK. So we have a target of 10 gigawatts of low-carbon hydrogen by 2030, and this has come from our hydrogen strategy published in 2021, which envisages that up to 35% of final energy demand could come from hydrogen by 2050. Also envisages £13 billion of value added for the UK economy and over 100,000 jobs developed. So we've got a strong level of ambition there, and since the publication of the strategy, we've been putting in place a number of different mechanisms to support the scale-up of hydrogen on the ground, both in terms of applications and production. So this slide shows you the timescale out to 2030. It's a little bit detailed, but I'll be talking through some of the particular features of that as I go through this presentation. So if we look at the supply chain first, as I mentioned, we've got a 10 gigawatt target out to 2030, and at least 50% of that will come from electrolytic or green hydrogen. So we're following a low carbon path within the UK. And as you'll see on this slide, we define low carbon in terms of 20 grams of CO2 per megajoule lower heating value. So projects that meet that cut-off are eligible to participate in a range of government funds. So we've got two particular sets of funds here in terms of hydrogen production, or two support mechanisms. We've got the Net Zero Hydrogen Fund, which is all around supporting the setting up of hydrogen production facilities. And then we've got the hydrogen business model, which is around supporting the operation of those facilities to produce hydrogen. And we have already launched the first joint call for both the hydrogen production, the hydrogen business model and the Net Zero Hydrogen Fund, with £100 million to support the first tranche of projects, with another call coming through this year. So that was last year, and we're moving on to that this year. In terms of the standard, we're looking to develop that out into a certification scheme out into 2025. So just to give you a snapshot of where we are in terms of current projects. This slide is a little bit old now, so I think we've got about 60 projects on there, and we're up to around 100 now. You can see that, as you'd expect, green is for electrolytic projects, blue is for CCUS-enabled, and rather a lot more of the electrolytic projects, as usual, they tend to be on a smaller scale, and I'll be talking a little bit more about those and the application areas. So the pie chart on the bottom right gives you a breakdown of the application areas that the electrolytic projects are supporting. So transport is up the front there with 42%, and then second in place, industrial applications. So I'm going to move on now and talk a little bit about those areas. Okay, so excuse me, as with many geographies, transport is one of our major sources of CO2, accounting for around a third of overall emissions. And we have a number of projects and programs in place to bring forward hydrogen for transport across a range of modes. For example, we're home to the UK's first hydrogen-fuelled aircraft. We've got around 300, it's actually gone up by putting £3 million for the UK's first multimodal transport hub. That's been increased more recently to £23 million. We've got £200 million going into freight trials. That's across both hydrogen and electric vehicles, and similar support going into buses. That's going to fund, by way of example, over 124 buses going into the Birmingham area. So range of different projects there. And looking out to 2030 and beyond, we're looking at 45 terawatt hours of demand in transport being met by hydrogen. Let's have a little look at what's going on in industry. Can I have some help with the slides, please? Thank you. So we're looking at delivering the decarbonisation of 2 industrial clusters by the mid-2020s, and then a further 2 by 2030. We've got 2 that have been chosen. You can see them on the map. So one is the East Coast cluster, which combines Humberside and Teesside. And then there's the HyNet cluster over on Merseyside. These clusters involve a whole range of industries and various types of hydrogen production, so it's not just CCUS enabled, there's also electrolytic hydrogen involved there. And we've got other forms of funding going in to support these programs. So one of the examples there will be the Industrial Energy Transformation Fund, which has got £290 million going in to help industries decarbonise out to 2027. So different funding routes in addition to the ones that I was talking about earlier, and similar levels of decarbonisation to be achieved out to 2035. The last area I wanted to talk about is hydrogen for heating. We've got a number of different activities there. working out to a decision on blending this year up to 20% of hydrogen into our natural gas grid, and then a decision on replacing natural gas with 100% hydrogen out to in 2026. In the meantime, a range of different projects. We've got the H100 project in Scotland, looking at 100% hydrogen in up to 300 homes, and then we are in the process of deciding on the first full village trial to convert to 100% hydrogen on a village scale, with plans to scale that up, so community, town, and so on, so that we can be fully confident of the feasibility and practicality of how we manage that conversion process, and as I say, with a decision point in 2026. So just to bring this short presentation to a close, we're scaling up hydrogen production at a pace with strong frameworks and support from government to help us on the journey there. We've got world-leading innovative companies, and we'd be delighted to make connections, come and talk to us about it on our stand. Supply chains and skills, a really strong area, particularly for us at the UK Hydrogen Fuel Cell Association. We're looking at helping companies to enter from beyond the hydrogen space, other mechanisms to enhance and develop skills and supply chains that we need to make this industry flourish. And we're also looking, I haven't mentioned it yet, but we're also looking at the transportation and storage of hydrogen. So as we scale up demand and supply, obviously we need to be able to move it around. Government is working with industry to build business models for that and make sure that the right frameworks are in place again to move those areas forward. And as I just talked about, we've got a number of different threads of support and different mechanisms in place to support scale up of demand across a range of different areas, including the range of transport modes. So in summary, obviously we're very aware that there's developments going on internationally, particularly in the States and elsewhere, to accelerate progress. So in the UK, we're looking at how we can build on this momentum that we already have so that we can maintain our leadership role, deliver the place for hydrogen in getting us to net zero, ensure that we develop our strong energy resilience through hydrogen, and that we can grow employment and exports. Thank you very much. I'll now hand over to Andrew for the Scottish snapshot.
Thank you, Celia. So, good morning. It's great to be in Paris. I'm Nigel Holmes. I head up the Scottish Hydrogen and Fuel Cell Association. I have some slides that will be coming up in a minute. But you're probably sort of sitting there thinking, well, Celia's told you about the UK. Why do we need to hear about Scotland as well? And the answer is that the rate of deployment of, for example, renewable energy in Scotland has actually been very, very fast. And what we're starting to see now are some real projects which are linking production of renewable energy into the production of hydrogen. So all good countries have a hydrogen strategy. The Scottish Government put out their strategy in December 2020, and just last month, December 2022, they published their Hydrogen Action Plan. So for me, this is really important. It's going from having a strategy to having something which is what we will deliver, and this is how we will do it. And it basically sets out some of the targets. The target I think you'll probably be most interested in is the target for 5 gigawatts of low-carbon hydrogen production by 2030. So not quite as much as France. The UK was 5, but they went up to 10 last year. And much of this will be from renewables. This is the schematic from the strategy. And what it shows clearly is that the Scottish Government is looking at using onshore and offshore wind as a source of renewable energy. And it's also thinking very carefully about how that might be used and deployed. So, for example, local markets, industry, heat, transport, but also potentially export into adjacent markets. And the rest of the UK will be a market for Scottish green hydrogen. And it won't be all green. There might be some blue in there as well. But the trend has been very much towards, as I mentioned earlier, scaling up renewables. There's now about 10 gigawatts of renewable generation capacity installed in Scotland, but that's small compared to what will be coming over the next 10, 15, 20 years. You can see from the actual table on the right that by the mid-late 2030s, there could be 50 to 60 gigawatts of renewable generation. Much of this is likely to be offshore wind, but there'll be a big chunk of onshore wind in there as well. So the Scottish Government is a target for an extra roughly 10 gigawatts of onshore wind capacity by 2030, 10 gigawatts of offshore wind, plus the capacity from some of the recent licensing rounds. And the licensing of the area of the seabed around Scotland, it will be a major driver for the production of renewable electricity, but also for the production of renewable hydrogen. They went out looking for 10 gigawatts. They actually started off, they got 25 gigawatts agreed, with another 3 that came in August last year. So a massive potential for offshore wind. Not all of that will be used for hydrogen production, but increasingly the projects that are starting to look at the business models are looking at very carefully at green hydrogen and power to X, of course. The deployment of the hydrogen will also bring opportunities in Scotland for establishing local hydrogen hubs. And this, again, this is from the Scottish Government's action plan. It shows some of the many areas across Scotland, and they're all distinctive. Each region has its own particular strengths and the areas that it will be deploying. Oh, and I should have said, within the hydrogen hubs, recent announcement just a couple of weeks ago, the region of Cromarty, number 4, has been announced as a free port area. So it's one of the 2 free ports in Scotland. There's the Cromarty, and there's the 4th green free port as well. So again, that brings new opportunities for companies to establish production and also manufacturing. Very quickly, because I recognise we don't have much time, I'm going to take you around Scotland, a quick tour of Scotland. And what I've tried to do here is actually to have real photographs of what's going on. I know there's some great big projects out there, hundreds of megawatts. These are all smaller, typically up to about 1 megawatt, but they are actually real projects that have happened. So starting down in Fife, Celia mentioned the H100 project. This is actually at a site that's been doing hydrogen for over 10 years. And the H100 project is going to be taking renewable electricity from a wind turbine. You can see the wind turbine in the picture just there. It's an offshore design. It's a 7 megawatt turbine that will be about 3-4 megawatt electrolyzer, producing hydrogen and using that for decarbonising households in that town of Methil, about 300 households. And importantly, it's an opt-in trial. It's one of the few trials that I know of where the householder will have a choice. They're already using natural gas. Do you want to use hydrogen? So it's a test of consumer acceptance of hydrogen for heat, as well as the technical and commercial aspects. Aberdeen, many of you may have heard of Aberdeen as the oil and gas capital of Europe. Well, it's changing. It wants to become the renewable energy and the hydrogen capital of Europe. And they've been doing some good work on, for example, the bus projects. They're also looking at floating offshore wind and hydrogen. This is one of the potential areas where the Dolphin 10 megawatt floating offshore wind could be deployed in a couple of years' time. Again, linking into the growth of demand on the beach, energy transition zone. And the free port, Cromarty. So they don't actually have any production of hydrogen there as yet, but what they do have is a fantastic port. They've got experience with using that for servicing offshore rigs. You can see here, and conveniently, they've got a floating offshore wind turbine parked in the area. And around Cromarty, there's a lot of area. There's a lot of wind farms there already. Many of those are starting to see challenges with curtailment of electricity. And so it's a great opportunity there to actually get not just the production established, but looking at some of the areas where that might be going on for shipment of hydrogen into adjacent markets. And lastly, but by no means least, we're going up to the very north of Scotland, the island of Orkney, and they've been doing some fantastic early innovation projects. Many of these have been led by the European Marine Energy Centre. Some of you may have come across Big Hit. I keep using this schematic because it actually shows a hydrogen valley that's been created in Orkney, production, transportation of hydrogen, storage of hydrogen, use of hydrogen in the transport, also in power and heat down at the harbour, and a real picture of some of the stuff that's going on at Kirkwall Harbour. The blue box is a fuel cell. On the left and the right, there's tube trailers carrying the hydrogen, and the ferry in the background brings the hydrogen across from the islands. And they're building on what they're doing. They've been learning a lot. That the key thing here is it doesn't always work out as planned. And if you want to talk about that, see me later. And the next stage is taking some of those lessons learned and how those might apply to much bigger project. And also in Orkney, there's a project. So this is a schematic. So this has not been built yet. But in the top right is the picture of what is there at the moment. So it's an existing oil terminal that will be repurposed for hydrogen production and power-to-X and potentially export of products such as ammonia or methanol. And that's not just the only location, the islands of Shetlands. So there's many countries are starting to look at artificial islands. Scotland's got lots of islands, so we don't actually need any artificial ones. Not yet, anyway. So just to wrap up, hope that's given you a quick snapshot of the Scottish Government's strategy, the action plan, and some of the projects that are happening in Scotland. As with Celia, I'll be on the booth just along there. If you've got any questions, just come and see me. And I think next up is Eniko, are you coming up to say anything? So just hand over to Eniko Dazen, Scottish Development International, just for a few words about what they can do to help you.
Yeah, hi, everybody. I think we don't have any time anymore, but just to say that Scottish Development International is here at the show, so we help French and international companies to set up in Scotland, and also supporting these companies coming to France. And I've got also my colleague from Department of International Trade, Caroline, here. And we've got 20 plus companies from the UK and Scotland. So here you can see our contact details. And please come to our booth. And we also have a whiskey reception at 5 o'clock. And we will be happy to host you there, where you can meet our companies and our team. Thank you very much. And just to say last word that tomorrow at 10:30 there is another session on opportunities in Scotland here.